Hello, this is Reverend Bob Zanicki of the First Presbyterian Church of Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. This is Wednesday, November 18th, 2020, and I'm happy to be talking to you once again, and I hope the week is going well. It's cold out there today, but it's clear and it's a little brisk. I had a little walk recently here down in the city, and but it was refreshing, and I trust you are doing well wherever you are. This past Sunday, we had a very meaningful worship service, and we had a treat once again. A child of the church, Matt Kearns, showed up, and which had been planned, but it was a surprise for his mother, Pam, who is our Christian Education Program Director. She didn't know that he was coming in, and so she surprised him. And we once again were just inspired by he plays the guitar and he also plays the banjo, and he shared two anthems with us, and in addition to singing, and they were just magnificent. They were beautiful. So I'll mention it again as I'm closing here, but the service is certainly worth your time of going to YouTube and at First Presbyterian Church, Wilkes-Barre, PA, and to experience that worship service. So we left Paul several days ago in Acts, as we're going through the Acts narrative here, the earliest history of the Christian church. We left him in Jerusalem. He had been wanting to go there, and he finally was able to get back there at this time. We are getting close to the conclusion of the history here of the early church, and we'll be doing that, but not today. We're getting very close, and what I'm planning on doing is begin next week for midweek meditation to share a meditation referencing Thanksgiving, being thankful. Okay, and then of course right after that we go into Advent, the 4 Sundays of Advent, for the season of Advent, of the appearing of our Jesus Christ, our Savior, into the world. And so I'll be dealing with the Advent texts over those 4 weeks. And then after that, into January, we'll finish up the Acts of the Apostles, probably just 2 or 3 more times for that. And we'll have gone through the earliest Christian history of the developing Christian church. So right now we find in the chapter that we're into here, chapter 21, that Paul he's in Jerusalem, he's in the temple, the Jewish temple, having gone through the Jewish ritual of purification, which says that he maintained his Jewishness. He was Jewish, okay? And he had seen the experience he had with Jesus, the risen Christ, changed his life, but it did not change his tradition in the sense that this is who he is. And again, there's no question history has brought this about, where our Jewish friends have maintained their own legitimate, worthy faith tradition, and some Jews of that earlier era that we're talking about saw Jesus as Messiah, Paul being one of those. And so henceforth Christianity developed, and so did what became known formally as Judaism from the Hebrew people. So we have those 2 tracks, but intimately connected, and I've been sharing that throughout this study of Acts, not without problems, because there was anger, there was mistrust, there was a sense of turning away and from the faith of Judaism for some, and so it became problematic. It became like what we look at as Jewish people back at that time, the leadership being against Paul because they felt he was a heretic, a blasphemer, and Paul, from his perspective, seeing that he's met the risen Christ and that this is the Messiah. And we continue to have those differences, okay, but we are from the same root, okay? And so thank God we've come a long way, and we've come to understand each other and to love each other and care for each other as Judaism would have that be, and as Christianity would also have that be for us today. But back at this time, there were some issues, and we'll be coming across those again as we continue on here until we conclude with the book of Acts, the Apostles. So there he is, but maintaining. He wanted to show the Jewish people, especially in Jerusalem, this is the area where it all started, okay? Well, in terms of the development of Judaism from the Hebrews and so on, but that he had not walked away from his tradition. Now, again, it gets complicated when we deal with it historically after the fact, okay? But at this time, he was still Jewish. So he did go through the rite of purification, but then there were those Jewish folk who were angry with him, felt that he was betraying them, and so there was a lot of anger. In fact, we're going to find out they wanted to do away with him. They wanted to actually kill him, execute him, because of what he was doing, okay? So there's a lot of misinformation going on here in Acts 21 that we're going to, well, I'm not going to read as much today, but if you would read through chapter 21 into chapter 22, but in beginning at verse 27 in chapter 21, when the 7 days were almost completed, now that's referring to the purification ritual in the temple, Jews from Asia who had seen him, Paul, in the temple, stirred up the whole crowd. They seized him, shouting, "This fellow Israelite, help! This is the man who is teaching everyone everywhere against our people, our law, and this place referring to the temple. More than that, he has actually brought Greeks, pagans, into the temple and has defiled this holy place." And it goes on from there, that there's just this anger that how could he desecrate the temple by allowing non-Jews, the pagans, to enter beyond the what was allowed with the court of the Gentiles to go in there. So but it turns out that wasn't true. That wasn't what happened. Paul was very respectful, and some people saw him with some Gentiles, some pagans, which would have been converts to Christianity, to following Jesus as Messiah. But Paul did not take them into the temple because he wouldn't do that. Well, and according to the text, of course, he didn't do it. But that was the misinformation, and they really wanted to do away with him. So, not only the ecclesiastical authorities, Jewish authorities, but they bring in the Roman authorities, the civil authorities, and say this man is causing problems and he's upsetting what's happening here in our city. So Paul is taken. He's beaten, he's harmed, physically harmed, and such. And so then what happens is we read in chapter 21 that Paul defends himself. But at one point, as has happened again earlier in our Acts, that he tells the Romans, the Rome authorities, I'm a Roman citizen. And due to the very fact that he's a Roman citizen, there are certain rights and privileges that are to be accorded to him. Okay, it's different if you were not a citizen. You could be mistreated quite a bit. But as a Roman citizen, no, there were certain things hands off. So we go through reading some of this again about that because Paul is a Roman citizen and Jewish, but a Roman citizen here, that the authorities, the civil authorities, are worried about that. They're concerned, we better not mistreat him and go a little further into our way of dealing with the law. Okay, so he's allowed to defend himself beginning in verse 37 of chapter 21, and he speaks to the people, the Jewish people, and talks about into chapter 22, brothers and fathers, listen to the defense that I now make before you. He's defending himself. He's been accused of wrongdoing, and he goes on to telling about I'm a Jew. In verse 3, born in Tarsus in Cilicia, but brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel, educated strictly according to our ancestral law, and zealous for God, and so on and so forth. And he rehearses again the story that we've read about earlier in Acts, about his conversion, about his change of direction in terms of being a persecutor of the Christian faith to being now a zealot for Christ and sharing. And again, as we've talked about multiple times, he goes to the temples, the synagogues, whenever he is traveling, to share this, what he believes is the way of following Jesus. And normally that doesn't go well in the synagogues, in the Jewish synagogues. And he also reaches out to the Gentiles, to the pagans. And as it turns out, that's where the bulk of Christianity develops, is through the pagans, the God-fearers that we talked about before, into the church. And Judaism has its branch of its faith, and Christianity has its, okay? And they move along. At one point, they're separate, okay? But yet, thank God, as I've said, that we are much more understanding with each other and for each other and respectful for each other. So we have that going on. And Paul tells about his conversion into chapter 22. And let's see here. Again, there are those people that want to kill him, to get rid of him. And the Jews, at one point, the Romans are going to flog him. That's kind of what you do with somebody that's maybe causing some problems. But again, Paul mentions, it goes back and forth from different folks and such. Well, I am a Roman citizen. And there again, they back off, the Roman authorities back off. And that, we better be very careful here. So the Romans, they don't want to get themselves in trouble, the guards or those that are in charge. So they decide, okay, let's take this Paul fella. And they thought he was someone else, but turned out that wasn't the case. They thought he was somebody from Egypt. But it turns out that Paul speaks Greek. He's a Hellenized Jew, Jewish person. He also speaks Hebrew, according to this. And so, in any event, at one point, the civil authorities think, let's take him to the Jewish council, the authorities there, to help them to make a decision, a judgment about this Paul, who is both Jewish and Roman citizen. Okay? And it's interesting here, again, if one is knowledgeable, paying some respect, paying attention to what's happening here, that when Paul is brought to the council, the Jewish council, Paul knows that in the council itself, there are Pharisees and there are Sadducees. Paul himself calls himself a Pharisee. And he knows, because he knows his tradition, that the Pharisees and the Sadducees don't agree on certain elements. And some of them are pretty strong disagreements. Okay, they're all the Jewish council, but two groups that are different in many ways. And one of them is on the issue of the resurrection, the idea that Pharisees believed in the resurrection. They believed in the resurrection of the body. That was something they believed in. The Sadducees didn't do that, okay? So at one point, Paul, in chapter 23, verse 6, when Paul noticed that some were Sadducees and others were Pharisees, he called out in the council, "Brothers, I am a Pharisee, a son of Pharisees. I am on trial concerning the hope of the resurrection of the dead." And of course, when he says that, he's going to catch the attention both sides. But for the Pharisees, they say they do believe in resurrection. And the Sadducees, of course, they don't, okay? When he said this, a dissension began between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. Paul was ever the great rhetorician. He understood people, and here he's introducing a division within the group that are going to judge him. Okay, so they start to wrangle among themselves. So it's really quite something that he did that. So again, he does that from verses 6 through 11. Let's see, I'll read a little bit more. The Sadducees say that there is no resurrection or angel or spirit, but the Pharisees acknowledge all three. Then a great clamor arose, and certain scribes of the Pharisees groups stood up and contended. We find nothing wrong with this man. What if an angel, spirit, or an angel has spoken to him? When the dissension became violent, the tribune, fearing that they would tear Paul to pieces, the tribune is the Roman fellow, ordered the soldiers to go down, take him by force, and bring him into the barracks. That night the Lord stood near him and said, now this is the Lord is speaking to Paul, keep up your courage, for just as you have testified for me in Jerusalem, so you must bear witness also in Rome. And that's where I'm going to stop. And we'll pick this up in several weeks and finish up the study of this Acts of the Apostles. But everything is set up for Paul to go to Rome. He had wanted to be in Jerusalem. Now he's going to Rome, and Paul had not been there. He didn't start the Roman church, okay? But he's written to them the book of Romans, the letter of Romans. But a lot of stuff is going to happen when he gets to Rome, and the history of the Christian church ensues. So, my friends, I'll look forward to talking to you next week as we are in the week of Thanksgiving. So God bless you, and I hope you continue to enjoy this day, and that God's blessings are with you and your family. Bye-bye.